Yeah, during the earthquake.
Like my wife.
I was there in
You were
North for
there?
the earthquake. Yeah,
Were you down there?
I was on Reseda Boulevard. Yeah, I was going to school at Northridge.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's still remember it well.
Right. So you're living in Northridge.
I was living in Northridge. Yeah.
All right, so let's start with that. So you were living in Northridge.
Yes, I was
Take
living.
us back to that day, to your memory.
Okay. So yeah, back in 1994, I was going to school at Cal State Northridge. I think I was a senior that year, and I lived right on Reseda Boulevard. And obviously on that day in February, we woke up to an earthquake.
January.
Oh, January. I guess it is January.
Pick it up again.
But that day in January, we had the earthquake, and it definitely was a life-changing experience. Woke up from that. I was in a townhouse kind of complex. A lot of destruction, a lot of damage. People, in the middle of the night, out there in the middle of the grass areas and so forth, trying to make sure everyone's out okay. Jumped in a car, proceeded to go home, which I lived in the Antelope Valley at the time, and even driving home was like driving through a war zone. Little fires, dogs running everywhere, brick walls knocked down, houses with damage. Trying to navigate my way back. The freeway obviously was damaged, so having to take back roads to even get there. So yeah, it was quite the experience, and still remember it very well today.
You were lucky to get back there at all.
Yes, I was. Yeah, looking back on that, just seeing how we had to kind of navigate around different back streets, and just seeing the amount of damage all the way, until you got to past Santa Clarita. It is remarkable that we got out when we could.
Our oldest was 6 at the time, spending the night at our in-laws who lived in Northridge. And we couldn't communicate with them because phones were down. Jerry tried to get to them. She went out down the 126 to Fillmore, spent 4 hours, didn't even make it to Fillmore. Her tank was
Yeah.
empty, so she
Right.
turned around, and we couldn't go down. We took side streets down at 4 a.m. the next day
Okay.
to get to them,
Yeah.
which was interesting.
Yeah.
So, as city manager, we wanted to get your perspective. This will be a whole 1 hour documentary when the anniversary hits.
Okay.
Because it'll be the 30th anniversary. That's hard to believe.
That's right.
What we'd like from you is to kind of comment on what the city is prepared for in the future.
In terms of future earthquakes.
In the future for earthquake happening.
Okay. Yeah. So as a reaction, a response, as a learning opportunity, if you will, the Northridge earthquake certainly had a dramatic impact on the Santa Clarita Valley, from transportation to everything else. Obviously, I came a little bit after that, about 2 years, almost to the day, after the Northridge earthquake, but we were still definitely dealing with the recovery of that. And in fact, on the financial side, I think it took us about 14 years to get through the FEMA process to deal with all the issues that came out of the Northridge earthquake in terms of recovering from that. But it really, I think, ingrained in the culture of not only the organization of the city, but also the community, the need for preparedness. And Santa Clarita is not one of those cities that is not prone to a lot of emergency disaster type situations. I think in the time I've been here, we've had 15 or 16 federally or state declared natural disasters, and that ranges everything from earthquakes, obviously, but also fires. Fires and wildfires are a big issue for us here, and flooding. We've had issues with flooding. So that being said, we know that the valley is susceptible to these different disaster type scenarios. And so we've really tried to put into place a lot of mitigation efforts, a lot of preparation, education, marketing, and so on and so forth. So not only from a city standpoint in terms of how do we recreate and build infrastructure that can withstand greater earthquakes or levels of earthquakes within the community, but also making sure that the community is prepared. So if there is a disaster such as an earthquake, the communities are prepared to work with one another to kind of work out the few issues that come out when those few days, but working as a community to look out for one another and to recover as time goes through. But on the infrastructure side, we've done a lot of things such as seismic retrofitting. Obviously, the Northridge earthquake was a result of that. We changed a lot of codes and building codes, and that has changed how we build things, once again, in terms of being more prepared and more sturdy, if you will, to withstand higher levels earthquakes. City Hall was damaged during the '94 earthquake. We had to move all the operations out into the parking lot for a period of time. So we've gone back through on the preparedness side and made sure that we've seismically retrofitted that project or our building, because that is our emergency operations center as well. So we've made sure that that building can, sustain and hopefully work through anything that comes up. But in addition to that, we've also created redundancies for that purpose. So we have the transit maintenance facility, which is across town, different area, if you will, is a backup emergency operations center. So if something does happen and City Hall is affected in any way, we can easily pick up and reopen in a different location that obviously is further away and creates a little bit of a buffer, if you will. So we've done a lot of things such as the infrastructure in terms of preparing that. We've also spent a lot of time with other agencies. We've created collaborations and partnerships with the different agencies within the valley so that if something happens, we're prepared, and we've been working with each other. It's not a first-time meet and greet, if you will, in the middle of an emergency. We meet with them on a quarterly basis. It's kind of an emergency preparedness group. And once again, it has all the different agencies throughout the valley to make sure that if something comes up, everybody has relationships, everyone has protocols, everyone has plans in place, and it's really just putting them in place and putting them in action and working together to recover and get through with the community, whatever that natural disaster may be. And then the third component, I would say, is working with the community. We spend a lot of time with community outreach, again, making sure people have basic supplies. If there is an earthquake and the water is out for a week or 3 or 4 days, whatever that might be, we've created what we call CERT, which is a program to prepare communities. So if you have a neighborhood organization or a group of 10 or 15 residents on a cul-de-sac, we'll work with Los Angeles County Fire Department. City staff will come out and provide a training to once again make sure that that community in itself can be self-sustaining for a period of time and prepared for an earthquake or whatever else might come up.
You missed the tunnel explosion in the Saugus shooting.
Yes, that's absolutely.
So if we had a major earthquake tomorrow, what directives, and phones went out, computers would go out for a short time, what have you told your staff? What are they supposed to do if they have no communication from you?
So staff is, as public employees, we are all emergency response workers. So in the instance that there is a major earthquake, staff is well aware that they have to report to City Hall. So our emergency operations staff would report to City Hall, and then we would get together as a group, divide into the planning groups, and start to assess the damage and understand exactly what's going on. But all of our city staff is prepared to show up on that day and be prepared to start the recovery process, the assessment process, and work with the community.
At one point, the city bought a bunch of satellite phones. Do they still have those?
Yes. So our emergency operations center, which again is housed at City Hall, we have a lot of we have redundancies. So whether it's satellite phones, so if the landlines are down, if for some reason cell sites are down, we do have satellite phones that can be used for communication. We also now, with new technology, have voice over IP, and we have redundancy as it relates to our internet connections. So we not only have hard lines down to downtown LA, we also have wireless and satellite connections for our Wi-Fi should that be necessary.
One of the heroes in Santa Clarita during the earthquake is one of our dearest friends, and she's no longer with us, Adele McPherson. I'm wondering if you could just comment about working with her over the years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, when I first came to the city, I met Adele. She was still kind of in the thick of recovery, if you will, and putting together the programs that we still we're still utilized today. Adele was our community services manager, community services superintendent, worked with us for, I think, just under 20 years or so. Wonderful lady. She knew a lot about emergency response, emergency preparedness, and once again, she was great at what she did. Great with working with people, great with putting together programs, and once again, I think I talk about that culture that's ingrained. She played a really big part in putting together those programs that we still utilize today in the community.
Great, Minji, what questions do you have?
So in your response to look at Carl. When you were still a student over at CSUN, you mentioned, could you just kind of go in a little bit deeper onto what you were kind of feeling as you were looking at these kind of scenes of destruction in the wake of the earthquake?
Okay. So as a student at Northridge, and as I mentioned, waking up to the earthquake, I think at 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. Again, it was a little bit of what just happened, and so getting up, going through what I had discussed in terms of trying to navigate my way back home, but trying to get out of the community. Obviously, I was still a student, had to go back to my home at CSUN, and the next couple of years were different. I think just the instant chaos, if you will, that occurred, I think that kind of stays with you for a while. I think as you looked at the collapsing of freeways and things of that nature, I think there was a lot more, as you're going through underpasses and going through different places, you have more of a heightened awareness of where you are and how long you're sitting there, particularly because, for a while we still had, aftershocks. But I think the thing for me that was a big issue was, like I said, I was I think a senior. No, I don't think I was. I think I was a junior. But I was a member of a fraternity, and one of my fraternity brothers lived right down the street from me and was in the apartment complex that collapsed, and he unfortunately passed away in that incident. So the death toll, if you will, of that had a personal effect. And so going to school and trying to get back to normal, but the recovery from the damage, picking stuff off the streets, buildings being knocked down, and all of that still took a couple of years. So I think for a couple of years it was definitely still top of mind, and I think is what part of kind of keeps that the importance of being prepared and being able to recover in a very quick way.
I know for me, it took maybe 3 or 4 years of not shuddering and holding my breath when I drove under an underpass.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that was, yeah. And then you got stuck under one at a signal, and you're like, okay, how long is the signal going to take? So that was, yeah, I think it definitely had a mental toll.
Yeah.
How do you think the earthquake and the city's response actually shaped the city going forward from that moment?
The city's response to the earthquake shaped us in a way that it clearly, and I think, as you look at other natural disasters that we've faced, what it did was, again, I talk about ingraining in our culture. It taught us that we're somewhat of a separated valley, right? We're in between, but we're not too far from the Antelope Valley, not too far from San Fernando Valley. But in a way, we are. We're surrounded by mountains. We're geographically isolated, if you will. And so the way it shaped us is that we quickly realized that no one's coming to save us. So as we deal with these issues, we are the people who have to save ourselves. So the more that we can be prepared and work collaboratively with everyone in the valley, the more effective we'll be at dealing with whatever comes up, as well as the recovery. But I think that earthquake was really that triggering point, if you will, that demonstrated to everybody that we are isolated geographically, and it's super important for us to work collaboratively with all the different agencies and really be prepared for whatever might come our way and figure out how we're going to deal with it.
Were there any lessons that you kind of took looking back at the prior city manager?
Lessons in what standpoint?
Did you look at how they responded, and did that kind of inform how you would move forward in another disaster?
I don't know that. I think that you learn, I think there was a lot of debriefing, probably more before I got there. But we always, look at each disaster as we go through it. We always come back and look at how we responded to it, what went well, what didn't go well. The Northridge earthquake, obviously, I think a lot of what came out of that was the fact that there was a much greater need for everyone to have in their mind, in their operational plans, being prepared for a disaster. And I think as disasters kind of are fewer and far between, I think that becomes less of a priority because agencies are just trying to get their work done. And so the importance of that means is that we have to keep telling people it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if we don't constantly prepare for it, it'll be 5-6 years, and all of a sudden, with turnover of staff, you're not prepared to deal with it. And so, looking back over the past city managers, one of the things that we've really found is you have to do it on an annual basis. You have to be doing tabletop exercises with your own staff. You have to bring staff together to basically go through a scenario as an emergency operations center and act as if you're carrying out an actual recovery phase. And not only that, you have to reach out to these different agencies and make sure they're participating. Otherwise, you're acting alone, and obviously that becomes much less effective. But it's easy to kind of put that on the back burner because hey, no one's expecting an earthquake. You know, they come so infrequently that it's easy for that to come off the priority list. But we certainly make that a priority and continue to emphasize that with other agencies as well.
In fact, one of the aha moments that Ken Polskamp shared with us is that the day the earthquake hit, the 12 pressing things that were on his desk that had to get done were no longer important.
Exactly. Yeah, it changes overnight, immediately.
Anything else?
I think I